one part content creator, one part humorist with a bit of quirky sprinkled on top, Denise Ellison Mercel is a social media strategist who focuses on getting your content to rise above the noise in a crowded newsfeed. Since 2015, Denise has helped companies and brands across North America create content that is rooted in their mission so that they can tell their story and stand out from their competition. Hello, Denise, and thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of the podcast. This is exciting.
Yeah, I'm also excited to know you. So let's start with the beginning. How did your passion for social media started?
Yeah, so it's kind of a like non-interesting but interesting story that I think a lot of people can relate to. So social media marketing wasn't a thing when I was studying and going to college. So I started out with I actually have a master's of public policy. And so I went and I followed that and I pursued that for a little while. And I realized that I wasn't on the trajectory that I wanted to be on. So I was living elsewhere and I moved back home and I decided that I'm just going to look for jobs and decide what I want. And then it's like, well, what if I started doing my own thing? So I started out and I had my own research company and I was doing research for mostly for nonprofits, but for some small businesses as well. So I was doing like surveys, research papers, looking into stats, data, analytics, and all that kind of thing. But in the meantime, I also had to market myself. Like I realized I can't just say that, oh, I have this business and that people would show up. I had to market myself. And so I turned to social media to market myself. And I learned everything that I possibly could, like mostly for free on the internet. And I really fell in love with social media marketing and I started to love it more than I loved what I was actually doing. So around 2015, I decided to pivot into doing social media marketing and content marketing full time and to offer that as the only service that I offered. So I had my own business for about 5 years offering social media marketing and content creation. And I recently was doing it now doing it for other companies in-house. So it's been a really interesting trajectory, like I said, and I think a lot of people probably have similar stories who have been on the show.
Yeah, I think that's actually the interesting part, the story behind the person that's doing social media for different brands. So now you are a social media strategist. Can you tell us more about this role? I mean, what does your day-to-day schedule look like? Because I'm pretty sure that each day is different.
Yeah, you're right. Every day is different, but also like similar. So
Yeah, exactly. Different but similar at the same time.
yeah, so really it's about, a lot of people think that it starts with like, what am I going to post to social media? But it really starts before that. So it's really looking at, okay, what is the purpose of this? What is the purpose of this company? What's the purpose of this brand? And what do I want people to feel and think and do? And what I feel like a lot of people miss out on is looking at like the mission and the values of the company and making sure that all of your content is really rooted in that. So when you're creating content, being like, okay, what's the purpose of this post? Is it to get people to come into your world and invite them into your world as like a cold lead so that they learn more about you, follow you on social, and get to know you a little bit that way, and then go deeper and deeper into the funnel? Or are you creating content that is meant to get people onto your email list? So they're going to be a little bit warmer. They have enough trust to give you their email. So making sure that if that's your purpose, that you're making that really clear. And just really, really making sure that your content is not just regurgitating what might be in your blog post or what might be in your podcast. I really am a huge fan of repurposing and taking source content to create social content. It just gives it like way more weight than just creating something out of nothing. But making sure that when you do that, you're not just slapping the whole thing on there. Your social media post should be about like one thing. If people are busy and distracted and there's so much going on in the newsfeed. So it needs to be about one thing. But even more important than that is your first line or two, they need to be extremely catchy to make your audience click on see more so that they see the rest of the post. Too often, you scroll through the newsfeed and see what people are saying. And if you just start with like, oh, well, the other day I did this, or, oh, I have some exciting news, or just things I'm like, okay, that's interesting, but it doesn't really compel me to want to click on read more and find out more and actually read it. So you need a hook, a really catchy hook that captures attention to make people click more. You need a like really clear one thing that you're talking about, and then you need the call to action. So it might be respond below, comment below, sign up for my newsletter, sign up for this opt-in, sign up for this webinar, call me and let's talk more about this program. But those are three things that you absolutely need inside of your content. So it's really reverse engineering your content from your source content and from your vision, mission, and values. And that's what my days look like.
Yeah, that's great. I love this answer because this actually answered to my next question. And my next question was, what are the key elements for creating a good to great social media strategy?
Yeah, that's it. Hook, line, and sinker. Your hook, your one idea, and sinker is your call to action.
Yeah, great. Love this. So now let's talk about skills, because I think these are really important too. What do you think are the most important skills a social media manager should develop? Or let's say someone who aspires to become a social media manager one day?
Yeah, I mean, this depends on what you love and what you want to do and what area you want to excel in. So you might excel in video, and you might want to excel in doing that tech, or you might want to focus on another part. But I think for everyone who wants to be a social media manager, you need to become really skilled in telling a story. So it's a bit more of a softer skill, and when people ask questions about social media, they're really interested in the tech and the tactics, but it really is getting down to the fundamentals of you need to know how to tell a story. You need to know how to craft that social media post to tell a story and where it fits into the bigger story of the company or the brand that you're creating it for. So that is number one. Number two is you need to be a good writer. So even if you're creating content that is like visual or it's videos or it's more graphics, you still need to be able to write and to bring that together. So I would say that's pretty important as well. But I would go back to storytelling as being like the vital thing that you need if you're going to be a social media manager.
Yeah, I think telling the story of a brand, it's really important. You started in 2015. Mm-hmm. Back then, I think Facebook was the number one platform. Everyone was on Facebook. Today, in 2020, everybody is talking about Instagram Reels, TikTok. How would you describe social media today? Because I think there are some differences from, I don't know, even from last year.
Yeah, I would describe it as like a really noisy place. I want to use different words, but you might have to censor them. So it's just, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of content being created. And with the pandemic, there's just been so much more content that's been created. So everyone every single day is overwhelmed by content. Content creators are coming out of the woodwork and really creating this glut of content that makes one, it's harder to stand out, but two, there's so much more bad content out there. So you really need to elevate what you're doing on social. But what I think is like 2015 and, even before then, or even not so long after then, Facebook was the main deal. Like, you're posting to Facebook, it was just obvious. Now you could spend a lot of time and waste a lot of time and resources trying to do everything everywhere. And so what I generally advise people is pick your main platform. What's your main platform going to be? And this doesn't really ever answer the question that people want, but you need to pick where your people are and a platform that you like. So if you are speaking to professionals and entrepreneurs, you're probably going to be looking at LinkedIn. If you're speaking to more like a B2C kind of market, then you might be on Facebook, you might be on Instagram. Like, it's really about looking at who your demographics are, where they are, and doing a little bit of research into that. And so picking your top one or two and creating content specifically for that platform. Often what you'll see is a company will create a piece of content and post the same thing
everywhere
on every platform. It's like, that's great. Like, again, I'm a huge fan of repurposing, but repurposing doesn't mean like copy and pasting. It means taking that core piece of content and seeing how you might be able to change it for another platform. So I'd say you're better off going like 2, maybe 3 platforms and not doing the rest at all, unless you're going to do them well. So an example could be like, maybe LinkedIn is your main platform. You write out like a written post and you have a nice image that goes along with it. That can be repurposed into like a TikTok or a reel or something, where instead of it being a written post, you're creating it as a video. So you might take the lines, you might say them out loud, or you might have like the word bubbles, depending on the type of video. But you can take that same concept, that same idea, the same like hook, the same content, the same call to action, and turn it into something else without having to like rethink the whole piece of content. But you're just putting a little bit of a different spin on it and repurposing it for the platform that it's going on. So being really intentional about that.
Yeah, I love that you said that, because I'm always telling people to create content according to the platform, because you might spend, I don't know, 2 hours creating something and then you post it on Instagram, but it's better for LinkedIn. So then you will lose 2 hours doing things, and then you are sad that you won't get engagement.
Yeah, you're like, oh, my content's great. Why don't people engage with it? And then you look at their Instagram reels, and they have like a widescreen video that's like not at all meant for the platform. Or, this is a little bit of a different topic, but if you're looking through like Instagram reels and someone starts, they're like, oh, hello, today I'm going to talk about this, that, and the other thing. Like, no, you need to get right to the point, because, okay, this is how I look through reels. Like, I don't give you more than 3 seconds. You need to capture my attention right away. And if you don't, or if you just speak like a robot, I'm not going to watch it.
Yeah, exactly. The same here. Denise, what are the most important lessons you've learned through the years? Because I think it's really important to share what you've learned so people can, I don't know, learn from your experience.
Yeah. So let's see. Lesson 1 is stick to a course. And what by that, what I mean is, so say you're like doing Instagram content, you're crushing it. That's where all your people are. And then Clubhouse comes around and someone's like, hey, you gotta be on Clubhouse. And you're like, oh, well, it's the newest thing and everyone's there. So I'm just gonna drop everything that I do, go over to Clubhouse, this new thing that's really popular now, but in a year from now, where is it going to be? And I don't even know if my people are there, and I don't even know how it works or how to best optimize content. But I'm just going to do that anyway because this is new and shiny thing. In that same vein is just sticking to one, like I said, one or two platforms, and not trying to do everything, not trying to have like a newsletter and like a newsletter on LinkedIn and creating content here and there and creating 25 different types of content. You could spend all day doing that and not doing the other things that you need to do. So that's number one, kind of stay in your lane in terms of that. Two is being open to learning and to change. So when I started in 2015, like honestly, I didn't know what I was doing. I was just writing stuff. I knew more than some other people. And so I was helping people who knew less than me to do better than they knew, but I didn't know everything, and I still don't know everything. So it's knowing that and wanting to improve your skills. And again, I think that this is a foundational thing where it's not, I need to learn how to necessarily like how the algorithm works, which is a whole other thing. I don't need to know all of these technical and tactical pieces. You need to become a better storyteller and monitor what kind of content performs well, what kind of content doesn't perform well, and really hone in on that. So like, are my opening lines strong enough? Is my message clear enough? And are people resonating with what I'm saying? So that would be lesson 2. And lesson 3 is follow your data. If you're creating all kinds of content, like I know I said number 1 was stick to your lane, but number 3 is don't keep doing it if it's not working. So maybe you're creating static content and you're like, oh, but it's so good, I think. But your stats and your analytics tell you that your videos are performing better, or carousels are performing better, or actually you're getting way more engagement on LinkedIn or somewhere else. Follow that. You can't just overcome things by like persevering and like never giving up. Like sometimes that consistency is great, but you need to know when to change course. So that's lesson number 3.
Yeah, that's great. Actually, at Socialinsider, we are releasing every month a new social media study. And we've studied Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and we discovered that, okay, so last year, when it comes to LinkedIn, carousels were on top.
Yeah.
This year, we are going to find something else. So okay, it's nice to stick to something. I mean, I also like to create, I don't know, Instagram carousels, but if they don't work, okay, I have to stop at one point.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes it's not a huge switch, like making a switch from like a carousel to like a more static image. That's not a huge shift. Or like learning carousels is a skill in itself. And I love that was what was on top. But sometimes not like hey, we're going to completely ditch this platform and go somewhere else. It's just that small, okay, instead of creating square images for Instagram, now we're going to create vertical images because that's what Instagram is showing. So let's make sure that we're paying attention to that and we're creating images that are really optimized for the Instagram feed.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious, what's your favorite social media platform?
This, like, yeah, ooh, you know what? I really love watching short form videos like Reels and TikToks. But I'm naturally a writer, so I really just love writing content for LinkedIn, and I really love the conversations that arise there. They're generally more productive and conducive to like business growth than what you might run into on Instagram or definitely on TikTok.
Yeah, actually, LinkedIn is also my number one platform. And it's the place where I go when I want to find other guests for my podcast or share studies or my work, anything. I mean, LinkedIn is
Yeah.
definitely on top.
Yeah. And I find some people share some really like interesting things where I'm like, oh,
Yeah, exactly.
like, and that's something that you don't get on platforms that are just generally everyone. So it's a really good space if you're more like in a B2B kind of place.
Yeah, that's right. So we talked a lot about content. How would you describe a good piece of content today? Why do you think people share posts from brands on social media? I mean, I'm following a brand, I see their posts and I'm sharing it, I'm resharing it on my feed or on my story.
I think it needs to speak to something deep inside of you. And generally that goes with like it resonates with you in terms of values or their mission or something else. Because why do people share? Because it's important to them. So I find myself sharing things like I'm quite like eco-conscious. So if it's about like the environment or reducing plastic or like stuff like that, I find myself more likely to share it if it has a really clear and good message. I also follow like these meme accounts where it's like dirty AF and like my therapist says, and it just like, it's funny because it's true. So I think it needs to be like, it needs to resonate with them on a deeper level, but it needs to be interesting and exciting and not just like blah, 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 30% of blah blahs did blah blah blah, unless it's really catchy stat. But if it's like, hey, today I did this and then I went and did this workshop, like I'm not sharing someone else doing that. How does that help me at all? Or how does that like further my like purpose on this earth? So you really need to connect with that in some way and make it catchy and exciting.
Yeah, I agree with this. I have two more questions for you. Earlier, we talked about metrics. How do you measure success on social media these days?
Here's how I recommend measuring success, and that is, did it do better than last week or did it do better than last month? Not like you can find average metrics out there, and that's interesting to compare to, but like, who are they looking at in here? It could be in like millions of people and not necessarily apply to you. So I think it's like, okay, so we're going all in on LinkedIn and this is where we're currently at. We have this many followers. This is our engagement rate. This is how many people share. This is how many people comment, that kind of thing. And you say, okay, let's make a goal to increase this by, 20% this month or what have you. And then you just do it again next week. You say, okay, how can I make this a little bit better? And then you see what posts are performing well, what posts aren't, and you do less of the ones that aren't, more of the ones that are, and really measure it that way. Like, I think you're like, yeah, you're competing for attention against everyone. But at the end of the day, you're just competing against yourself and trying to make everything better and resonate more. Obviously, it depends on your goals. If your goal is higher engagement and higher followers, that's what you're going to look like. If your goal is like getting more people on your email newsletter list, you can track that as well. So just looking at comparing it to your previous self.
Okay, great. So basically you have to, create content, analyze that content and see, okay, so this type of content works great for me. I should continue doing this. This is not so good. So maybe I should stop.
Yeah, exactly. Or sometimes I find like, I don't want to say that with like a blanket statement, because sometimes when you post a picture of yourself and like your dog and you're like, hey, and it gets all kinds of like engagement and interest, and then you're like, hey, sign up for this opt-in, that gets less uptake.
Yeah.
Just so what you're going to want to do is be like, okay, well, how can I make the one about signing up for my opt-in a little bit more exciting? So that's kind of just the way it goes. If you're asking people to take an action, it will naturally get a little bit less engagement than if you're like, hey, these are my babies and stuff that people just love seeing.
Yeah, that's true. And my last question for you, and this is the question that I love the most. If you could teach me only 3 things about social media, what would you teach me? What do you think are the most important 3 things a social media manager should know?
Okay, this is exciting. So I think what you need to know is that, I mean, sometimes I feel like this is too obvious to say, but it's not obvious enough for people to do it. And that is that social is meant to be social. So you don't want to just be like announcing things all the time and just going away. The like bare minimum is like, you're going to post something, and if people comment on it, you need to respond. And like bonus points if you respond with something that keeps that conversation going. So it might be a question or something. So that's like the bare minimum, is responding to comments on your own content. But what I would advise is taking the time to go comment on other people's content. And, probably not randomly. You want to look at your goals. It might be like complementary businesses. It might be potential customers, past customers, like influencers of people in your same industry. But you want to take time to go comment on other people's content to, one, make them notice and go check you out. But also to have a conversation with people in your industry and connect with people that you may not have otherwise connected with, just sharing your own content because they are in other people's networks. So that would be number 1, is being social on social. Number 2 is, like, there's so many things to choose from. So we want to make sure that we're social on social. Number 2 is not being afraid of just putting something out there, because sometimes I'm creating content, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. People are going to love this. And they don't. And then I'm writing something else. I'm like, oh yeah, this is okay. And people just like eat it up and they love it. So not being too judgmental of something before you put it out there, and knowing that it's like social media. It's one, I mean, as long as you're not being like completely out of line, put it out there. Like, it is not going to harm you if people don't like it. You can always take it down if you're like, actually, this doesn't feel on brand. But just going for it. And if you have an idea and you're like, oh, is this pushing, like, are people going to resonate with this? Just put it out there, because you don't know until you try. And number 3 is be inspired elsewhere. And by that, I mean, a lot of social content is like, oh, I just like 3 swipes ago, I saw someone say the same thing. You don't necessarily need to look to only your own industry for inspiration. So you could look to your own hobbies and relate it to that. You could look to like other industries and see what they're doing in their content, or even looking at other types of content and seeing, okay, how can I put more of this into my content? So for example, since the rise of TikTok, people have been a lot more aware of making their content punchier, because TikTok like originally had 15 seconds. It's like, what can you actually do in 15 seconds? Well, it turns out a lot. And so how can you use those same lessons to make your written content or like carousels or whatever else, make sure that they're straight to the point and getting someone to take the action that you want them to take?
Yeah, great. I totally agree with this. And I'm going back to number 1. You said be social on social. Actually, when I took the time and answered on LinkedIn to some people that are in my industry, but not all of them, those people come back to my LinkedIn profile and they will like my post, comment, share my LinkedIn newsletter. And that was great when I found out that it was really great. So this is
you're like, oh my God, I could have just been commenting on post this whole time instead of
Exactly.
driving myself crazy, creating, and just getting lost in the newsfeed.
Yeah, and the fun part is that you don't have to write a blog post. You just have, I don't know, it takes me 10 minutes per day or something like that. But
Yeah,
the
like
results are great.
a thoughtful response beyond like great post. Or, people just
Great insights.
yeah, like a bunch of flames or like, oh.
Yeah, that's true. Denise, thank you so much for accepting my invitation. It was really nice talking to you. Please tell us, where can people find you, follow you?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and you can search Denise Allison Mercer, or like, linkedin.com/Denise Allison with one L. And you can find me over there.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. It was really nice talking to you, and I learned a lot of things.
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.